They say trust is the glue that holds relationships together. They say you should give people the benefit of the doubt. They say love, friendship, and belonging begin with openness. But reality is quieter and far less romantic. Some people don't refuse to trust because they are cold, arrogant, or broken. They hesitate because trust to them has never felt safe. Because every time they opened a door, something valuable was taken. Because closeness once came with a cost their nervous system still remembers. This is not loud distrust. It doesn't shout accusations or build walls overnight. It whispers. It waits. It studies tone, pauses, inconsistencies. And beneath it lies a question that never fully rests. What if I let you in and lose myself again? This is the silent psychology of people who never trust easily. Not as a flaw, not as a weakness, but as a survival pattern shaped by experience, memory, and fear that learned how to hide. Today, this reflection explores what distrust protects, where it comes from, and what it quietly asks for without forcing answers. Let's begin. People who don't trust easily are rarely obvious about it. They don't announce their caution. They don't accuse. They don't demand reassurance. Instead, they watch. They listen a little longer than most. They respond carefully, choosing words the way someone steps across thin ice. Slowly, deliberately. They share facts, not feelings. Stories, not vulnerabilities. Enough to seem open, never enough to feel exposed. From the outside, this restraint is often misread as emotional coldness, as superiority, as disinterest. But inside, something else is happening. Trust for them is not an abstract value. It is a physical sensation, or rather, the absence of safety in the body. A tightening in the chest when closeness approaches too fast. A subtle alertness when someone asks personal questions too early. Pause before responding, not to manipulate, but to scan. Is this safe? Is this consistent? Will this cost something later? This kind of guardedness doesn't come from a desire to control others. It comes from a need to protect what was once unprotected. People like this often appear independent, self-sufficient, emotionally mature. But that independence was rarely chosen freely. It was learned. Learned in environments where relying on others led to disappointment, where emotional openness was ignored, dismissed, or turned against them, where being perceptive mattered more than being expressive. So they adapted. They became excellent readers of tone, sensitive to shifts in mood, quick to notice contradictions between words and behavior, not because they distrust everyone, but because their nervous system learned that trust is something you verify, not assume. And so they keep a quiet guard, not a wall but a filter, not a lock but a waiting room. People are allowed in slowly, carefully, only after patterns repeat. Only after consistency proves itself over time. This doesn't mean they don't want closeness. It means closeness has a history, and history taught them that some doors, once opened too quickly, are very hard to close again. No one is born suspicious. A child reaches out naturally. They assume warmth. They expect care to be consistent. Trust begins as instinct, so when it breaks early, it doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly, like water wearing down stone. For many who struggle to trust, the origin isn't a single dramatic betrayal. It's repetition. Small moments that taught a dangerous lesson. Closeness is unpredictable. Promise that wasn't kept. Affection that arrived only when convenient. Emotional availability that changed depending on mood, stress, or approval. Sometimes it was neglect disguised as normalcy. Needs minimized. Feelings brushed aside. Sometimes it was love with conditions, warm one day, withdrawn the next. And the child adapted. They learned to read the room before speaking, to sense when it was safe to ask, and when it was better to stay quiet. They learned that expressing too much could overwhelm others, or worse, be used against them later. So they stored emotions carefully, like valuables hidden deep inside a drawer that rarely opens. This is where distrust often begins, not as anger, but as calculation. Not "I don't trust you," but "I'll see first." What's important here is this. The child wasn't trying to be distant. They were trying to stay regulated. When care is inconsistent, the nervous system learns vigilance. When emotional safety is unstable, awareness becomes survival. And over time, this vigilance hardens into identity. By adulthood, it no longer feels like a response. It feels like personality. People may say, "You're too guarded. You don't open up. You keep people at arm's length." But they don't see the origin. They don't see the child who learned that trust must be earned slowly, because losing it once hurt too much. So now the adult self waits, not because they enjoy distance, but because closeness once came with confusion, disappointment, or loss. And the body remembers that long after the mind forgets the details. Trust didn't fail because they were naive. It failed because it was given before it was safe. Long after the original moments fade, the body continues the work the mind no longer remembers. For people who don't trust easily, caution is not a belief. It is a reflex. The brain learned early that uncertainty can hurt, so it adjusted its settings. Instead of relaxing into connection, it scans. Instead of assuming safety, it predicts outcomes. Instead of presence, there is preparation. This is vigilance. Psychologically, it looks like overthinking conversations, replaying tones, analyzing pauses, noticing what was said and what wasn't. Neurologically, it is the threat system staying slightly awake even in calm moments. Not panicked, just alert enough to react. This kind of brain is very good at pattern recognition. Connects dots quickly, sometimes too quickly. A delayed reply becomes a possible rejection. A change in energy becomes a warning sign. A small inconsistency becomes a reason to pull back. Not because the person wants distance, but because the brain believes distance prevents pain. The irony is that this vigilance often masquerades as logic. It feels rational, measured, even wise. "I'm just being careful. I've seen this before. I don't rush people." And in many ways, it worked. Vigilance once protected something fragile. It reduced exposure. It minimized emotional loss. But protection has a cost. A brain trained to anticipate harm struggles to stay present in warmth. It waits for the shift, the drop, the moment safety changes. So even in healthy connections, there is tension beneath the surface. Not visible, but felt. Relaxation feels unfamiliar. Trust feels like risk, not relief. And when something feels unfamiliar, the brain interprets it as unsafe. This is why reassurance rarely lands. Why words alone don't dissolve doubt. Why consistency over time matters more than intensity in the beginning. Because this system doesn't respond to promises. It responds to patterns. The tragedy is not that these individuals are too cautious. It's that their caution was once necessary and never updated. The brain did exactly what it was designed to do. It learned. It adapted. It remembered. But memory, when left unexamined, can turn into a cage. Not because it wants to trap you, but because it doesn't know the danger has changed. People who don't trust easily are often misunderstood in one crucial way. They are not detached from closeness. They are deeply aware of its power. They know how connection can soothe, how being understood can feel like warmth after a long winter, how intimacy can quiet the mind. And that is precisely why they hesitate, because closeness to them is never neutral. It has weight, history, consequences, so they live in a constant internal negotiation. One part leans forward. It wants to be known, to be seen without explanation, to rest inside another's presence. Another part pulls back. It remembers the cost of leaning too far, the loss of self that can happen when boundaries blur, the pain of realizing too late that trust was one-sided. This creates a quiet tension. They may initiate conversations but limit depth. They may listen deeply but reveal selectively. They may care intensely but from a distance that feels safer. From the outside, this looks confusing. Warm one moment, reserved the next. But inside it is consistent. Connection is allowed. Dependency is not. Because dependency once meant vulnerability without protection. So they try to love without losing control. To connect without dissolving. to stay present without surrendering their center. And this is exhausting. Monitoring closeness takes energy. Evaluating emotional safety takes energy. Holding back what wants to move forward takes energy. Over time, this can feel like loneliness, even when surrounded by people. Not the loneliness of isolation, but of partial presence. Being there but not fully. Known but not entirely. And yet, the idea of full openness feels dangerous. Like stepping into deep water without knowing how cold it is. So they remain on the edge. Close enough to feel warmth. Far enough to escape if needed. This isn't because they don't value connection. It's because they value survival. And when survival once required restraint, restraint becomes the default. The conflict isn't between love and fear. It's between longing and memory. Between what the heart wants now, and what experience taught the body to avoid. There is rarely a single moment when guarded people decide to change. No dramatic confession, no sudden leap of faith. Instead, recognition arrives quietly, comes in small, almost forgettable moments. A conversation that feels safe but ends too soon. A person who remains consistent, yet never fully reaches the inner world. A connection that could deepen but stalls. And something inside notices, not with panic, with fatigue. The vigilance that once felt necessary now feels heavy, like armor worn long after the battle has ended. The person begins to sense the cost. Not the obvious kind, but the slow erosion of intimacy, the absence of being fully met, the quiet ache of always holding something back. This is not self-blame. It is awareness. A realization that protection has become permanent, that the guard never sleeps, that even in moments of safety, the body stays ready to retreat. And with that comes a gentle question. What if this distance is no longer protecting anything? What if it's only preventing rest? This question doesn't demand an answer. It simply lingers. People like this don't suddenly trust more. They begin to notice when they pull away, how quickly they close emotional doors. How reflexive their withdrawal has become. They start to see patterns, not in others but in themselves. Moments where silence replaced honesty, where independence replaced asking, where control replaced vulnerability. And this recognition is unsettling, because it challenges an identity built on caution, an identity that once kept them safe. Letting go of distrust feels like betrayal, not of others but of the self that survived. So the realization doesn't lead to action. It leads to curiosity, a soft acknowledgement that something inside is tired of holding everything alone. This is the turning point, not trust yet, not openness, just the understanding that constant vigilance may no longer be necessary everywhere. And that understanding, however small, creates space. Space for choice, space for rest, space for something new to emerge, slowly, carefully, on its own terms. For people who have lived behind emotional guards, healing is often misunderstood. It is not about becoming open overnight. It is not about trusting everyone. It is not about silencing caution. Healing, for them, begins somewhere quieter, inside. Before trust can move outward, something must settle inward. The body must learn that it no longer has to stay braced at all times. That vigilance can soften without vanishing. That protection does not need to be absolute to remain effective. This is not surrender. It is recalibration. The guarded nervous system doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to permission. Permission to pause instead of scan. Permission to stay present without rehearsing escape. Permission to feel without immediately preparing for loss. Softening often begins in moments so small they barely register. Choosing to stay in a conversation a little longer. Allowing a feeling to exist without labeling it dangerous. Noticing warmth and letting it remain just for a breath. Nothing dramatic changes, but something loosens. Trust in this phase is no longer about other people. It becomes about the self. Can I trust myself to leave if I need to? Can I trust myself to speak if something feels wrong? Can I trust myself to survive disappointment again? When the answer begins to shift, the world feels less threatening. Because the deepest fear was never betrayal alone. It was being trapped inside it, being unprepared, being powerless. So healing restores power inward. Boundaries stop feeling like walls. They become choices. Caution stops feeling like isolation. It becomes discernment. And trust stops being a leap. It becomes a gradual leaning. This kind of healing is slow, uneven, non-linear. Some days the guard relaxes. Other days it tightens again. That doesn't mean nothing is changing. It means the system is learning a new rhythm. One that allows closeness without collapse, distance without guilt, and openness without erasure. This is what integration looks like. Not the disappearance of fear, but the ability to carry it without letting it decide everything. Trust, for those who never learned it safely, is often misunderstood. It is imagined as a leap, a risk, a moment where fear is defeated. But for the guarded, trust is something quieter. It is not a door thrown open. It is a window cracked, just enough to let light in. Trust becomes a choice made again and again in small moments, staying present when the instinct is to withdraw, allowing consistency to speak louder than words, letting time do what intensity never could. This kind of trust does not ignore history. It honors it, says, I remember what happened, and still asks, what is happening now? Slow trust does not mean weak trust. It is deliberate, observant, rooted. It allows caution to remain, but no longer lets it rule everything. Because the goal was never to become fearless. It was to feel safe enough to stay. People who trust slowly often love deeply. They notice nuance. They value sincerity. They do not give themselves away carelessly. What they offer when they do is real. And perhaps that is the quiet truth beneath all of this. Distrust was never the absence of hope. It was hope protected by memory. And memory, when met with gentleness, can soften. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to let warmth linger. Enough to believe that not every closeness ends in loss. Enough to rest just a little inside connection. If parts of this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you recognized itself here, know that you are not alone in this pattern. Many carry this kind of caution silently. Many learned to survive by staying guarded. And many are slowly learning that safety can be rebuilt without forcing, without shame. If you'd like to stay connected, this channel is a space for exploring the hidden corners of the human heart, the patterns we rarely name, the emotions we often carry alone. You're welcome to share your thoughts in the comments, if it feels right, only if you want to. Sometimes your words help someone else feel less alone. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness.